Okay, I didn't
And
realize that.
I'm a general.
The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for our Cable Reports and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Welcome, Senator Steve Newman. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Woody. It's good to be with you again after many years.
Delegate Scott Garrett, good to see you, sir.
And you as well, Woody.
We had a shakeup in the Senate yesterday. Senator, tell us what it means for you and your constituents and the state of Virginia from your perspective.
Well, there's two sides to it. Clearly, the people of Virginia have spoken. They've elected their leaders, and the Senate needs to respect that. And so I think we had an organizational change, and that's fine. But Woody, what I struggled with, and I've continued to struggle with, is the Senate of Virginia has held on to its traditions and rules very carefully. And this is outside the control issue, but when it comes to those traditions, they've been pretty important. And I've just not, in my 23 years, seen a lieutenant governor stand up and say, we have no rules, which is exactly what was said. And you know, I've just heard from Hunter Andrews and from other leaders that our rules are important. So what I think we're entering is a time that makes Virginia look a lot more like Washington than Virginia. And I think that's too bad, because under the current set of rules, if someone was maybe ill on the other side, we could go back and change all the committees back. And that's not a positive thing for Virginia. We need to respect elections and then get up here and get to work. And I think the best way to do that is under a structure that our forefathers have given us. So my struggle is more about the traditions of the Senate, but we're going to make it work. Virginia has us here to make it work, and we're just going to make it work.
So after all the dust settles, I guess maybe, I forget who said it, no permanent enemies, no permanent friends, just permanent interests to get the people's business done.
That's all it's about. I mean, ultimately, the people of Virginia put us here to get a job done, and that's what we need to do.
Delegate Garrett, good to see you. You're one of how many physicians in the General Assembly?
We now have four.
Four.
Yes, sir.
Four. And what committees are you on in the House of Delegates?
I serve on the Health, Welfare, and Institutions Committee and on a subcommittee of that. I serve on the Transportation Committee, and I now chair one of our subcommittees in the House Transportation Committee. And I was just this year honored to be appointed by the Speaker to the House Appropriations Committee and the subcommittees that deal with health and human resource issues, as well as compensation and retirement issues.
Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
that. City of Lynchburg is a beautiful place. You have a wealth of institutions there in terms of education. Talk to us a little bit about those.
Well, we truly are blessed at many levels. We have 5 colleges in our community, a great community college with Central Virginia Community College, Liberty University, Lynchburg College, Randolph College, Sweetbriar College. We're truly blessed in that regard. It gives a vitality, it gives a sort of a youthful exuberance, and a lot of it, and then too, those institutions bring a lot of assets with the arts and drama and so forth to our community. So some athletics opportunities. So it's a tremendous asset that we have.
And Senator Newman, who are some of the major employers, and why is transportation so important for the Lynchburg area, especially rail?
Well, it is. You know, Scott did a great job. First, we're delighted that Scott is now on appropriations. That's a big deal for us, and Scott, we really are going to look forward to counting on you in many ways, and he's certainly capable of doing it. Clearly, our large employers, and it's a great thing, tend to be around higher education. And Scott's gone through that list, but if combined together, it clearly would be our largest employers. We also, of course, have health care. That's a big deal, and whether they're working for our local hospital or employed in private practice, it's a big part of our economy. We also have Genworth. Genworth is a very large company in our area, has been spun off of GE Financial, but determined to keep their headquarters in Virginia, and they're a big employer in our region.
And I believe you have some legislation regarding Genworth.
I do. It's important that if these companies are going to make a decision to keep their headquarters in Virginia or in Richmond, Virginia, or Lynchburg instead of New York or New Jersey, that we do what we need to do to help them. In this case, Genworth had a bill that allowed them to reorganize some of their finances and how they invest their money for life insurance and annuity. They asked me and a few others to come in and support bills. We were able to get that all the way through. It's been a good bipartisan support in the Senate thus far, and hopefully we'll get those bills all the way through the House.
By the way, congratulations on getting the transportation funding bill through last year. That was a major achievement that will benefit the Commonwealth for years. However, the hybrid tax is about to be repealed soon. What caused that?
You know, when we introduced the bill early on, we had a number of moving parts in the legislation. But as the bill ended up moving forward, some of us just felt like maybe it was a bridge too far, you know, for some of us in the more rural parts of Virginia, because a lot of the tax increases really were going to go to other areas, and so there's some struggles. But I just in particular was concerned about the hybrid tax, because the hybrid tax has its genesis in the original introduced bill. But when you end up going with so much of the burden going to the sales tax instead of the gas tax, the hybrid tax no longer makes any sense. It's just an arbitrary tax that was put on the good people of Virginia that decide that they are beaten down by the high gas prices and they're making another choice. So we had a good bipartisan piece of legislation that is now out of the Senate and to the House of Delegates that will eliminate that hybrid fee, and hopefully we will not have bills like that could come forward in the future.
Now, we have a great port, the Port of Virginia. The traffic there is going to increase as a result of what's going on in the Panama Canal. What are some of the transportation needs that relate to that enhanced traffic at the Port of Virginia?
Well, there are a number of them, and we have tried to deal with them in a number of ways. One of them is there is additional tolling that's taking place. There is a new Hampton Roads Authority, which really resembles what we have in Northern Virginia. That bill passed off the Senate floor yesterday, and I know there's a version that is in the House as well. You know, in our area, we've got a number of high priorities, which include the Oddfellows Road interchange, which Scott was kind to work with us and Kathy Byron and others to get that done. There is some work on 501 that's extremely important to us. There is also the Crosstown Connector that's being completed at this time. And in my Botetourt area, there is an issue of 81. 81 is a incredibly important road, but there are a lot of opportunities for wrecks and problems on that road, and so we've got the funding in place now to help those interchange, especially near Bonsack and other areas of Botetourt County.
So that infrastructure, highway infrastructure, is obviously critical to attract new businesses and to keep the ones there.
Absolutely, and Senator Newman is too humble. He really led the charge for our local area, working with former Secretary of Transportation Sean Connaughton to get the resources for us to be able to open up for economic development opportunity the interchange at 460, as well as to offload some of the truck traffic such that will decompress some of our traffic on Camrose Mountain Road. And Senator, I really appreciate your leadership with that. You mentioned earlier the colleges. Some of the legislation that Senator Newman and I both, as well as Delegate Byron, have been strong proponents of, patrons of, has been increasing our tuition assistance grants. Our Lynchburg College and Liberty University are the two largest users, our students, of those opportunities. It makes sense. It gets an opportunity for these young folks to get a great quality education and not be so encumbered moving forward.
And not only for those youngsters, but for adults who are transitioning because they've been laid off or lost their jobs. They play an important role there too, do they not?
Surely, absolutely.
What about the emphasis on science, technology, engineering, math, and health? Everybody agrees that that's a great goal, but there are high school students who may not want to go to college or even junior college. What about more emphasis on vocational education, for example?
Absolutely, and we've been, particularly at the community college, Central Virginia Community College has been a leader in this regard, working towards understanding and recognizing that vocational and technology education truly is the path for many of our graduates from our high school systems. Senator Newman, again, has been a leader on that in the Senate and the Education and Health Committee to make sure that we, in fact, have a path to a productive, meaningful, quality life from the work experience perspective. For those young people that aren't intended or don't really have the drive to go to college, they'll still have meaningful employment once they leave our school systems.
Back to transportation for a moment, because I do want to take advantage of your expertise and experience. Two matters, both that involve the federal government. Part of the transportation funding depends upon, if my memory serves me correctly, the Congress passing the Marketplace Freedom Act. We also have military installations that are very important to us. I believe a couple of years ago there was some concern by the Navy down in the Hampton Roads area that their transportation needs weren't being dealt with appropriately. Talk to us about those two issues and what's happening with them, please.
Well, Woody, I spent a number of years as chairman of the Transportation Committee, and these are the type of issues that, while they don't always just affect our region, they affect the Commonwealth of Virginia. And clearly, in the Hampton Roads area, something had to be done. There's just simply are not enough crossings. The Navy had indicated that if something didn't happen down there, they were likely to outsource a lot of the jobs that are currently in Hampton Roads to other bases around the country. We are lucky and fortunate that we have a very solid deep port in Virginia, and so we can do things at that port that just simply can't be done in Wilmington or in other places. So that's been helpful. I do believe that what the Governor McDonald did as far as the private contract goes, while unpopular with some because it has some tolls, it really is a multi-billion-dollar fix to that problem down there. And then, of course, there's the issue of 460, which is important to our region because once you get that product out, you need to be able to take it to the other regions of the state and throughout the country. I think the 460 project has some merit, and I know there's some debate back and forth about that item. So to me, keeping a careful balance at the port is important. This year, probably the most important piece of legislation is the Hampton Roads Authority, which does not have taxing authority, which I personally can't support if they did have taxing authority, but does have the ability to organize their projects with all the localities coming together, is an important bill for the Commonwealth.
And I believe the Marketplace Freedom Act has been pending before the Congress. I think it may have passed the Senate last year. It would allow the state of Virginia, among other states, to tax those out-of-state internet retailers, which we cannot do right now. And there's a part of the financial component of the transportation bill related to that. What happens if the Congress does not pass that act?
Well, it's part of the bill that I really kind of struggled with, honestly. I think the Congress of the United States has got to take that bill up and give some directions on where we're going on that bill. But if for some reason they do not pass it, make no mistake about it, the gas tax on working Virginians is going to go up. That's the quid pro quo in the bill. I struggled with that because I just think that there are so many working Virginians in our area that are struggling under the crushing price of now natural gas and now gasoline, that adding an additional tax on gasoline would be poor timing at least and wrong-minded. So my hope is that provision of the bill will not kick in, but if there is not action on marketplace equity, the current bill has an automatic trigger in it to raise the gas tax.
Delegate Garrett, we also have a lot of military installations around the state. We have a lot of federal employees, a lot of federal contractors. The new governor is talking about the need to diversify our economy to wean our way away from that. So talk to us about that, especially in terms of sequestration.
Surely. Well, about 30% of Northern Virginia's economy is funded by Department of Defense contracts. A lot of those are procurement folks. About 40% of Tidewater's economy. Those are huge economic engines for for our Commonwealth. They add to our tax base so that we have revenue and resources to be able to meet our constitutional requirement to educate our children, to keep our families safe, and to work to make the transportation issues, the infrastructure issues, as well as our public health commitment. So these are very, very serious issues. And Senator Newman talked about the uncertainty that we're still struggling with out of Washington. We don't know whether the Marketplace Equity Act is going to pass. We need that certainty. He mentioned earlier about the certainty or lack thereof of sort of what's happening with the organization in the Senate, as an example. And I truly believe that's the greatest challenge for all of our people back home, across the Commonwealth, and frankly across the nation, is the lack of certainty, the lack of guidance. And that gets fundamentally at some issues of trust. I know Senator Newman, Delegate Byron, myself, we've all been very involved and very engaged in trying to have people understand better what's going on so that we can regain back people's trust.
And I know you've been involved in educational issues, especially K through 12. Local control is on the agenda. Again, there was a bill passed last year that would allow a newly created state authority to take over failing schools. There's been some pushback about this. Tell us where that stands.
Well, Senator Newman and I both have legislation before our respective houses, and that will be to tweak the legislation from last year a bit, such that when schools that have not completely, they're not fully accredited, they've not completely passed everything. If they've done that for 3 years in a row, they're in a bit of a challenge status this year. And one of those schools is a local school, Sandusky Middle School. Senator Newman and I sat down and trying to brainstorm on how we can address this issue. The state had changed the composition and the characteristics of the standards of learning tests last year, such that a number of schools statewide had failed math or failed reading specifically. So our legislation would be to say we need to take another year to relook at this and make sure that before we're going to change the path whereby our local school board is administering that school program, that we've given them every opportunity to address that. We're blessed. I think our local school folks have heard the message, and I'm hopeful that they're very engaged as we speak in doing that. All this snow is not helping, though. We've got a lot of snow days that our kids are missing. So.
Exactly. Senator Newman, to what extent are you hearing from parents, teachers, and maybe even some students about the burdensome requirements of the standards of learning?
Well, you know, over the years, I have generally been in favor of high academic standards that help our children, and here's why. I happen to be around and happen to be on the Education Committee back in the House of Delegates back when we first started looking at higher standards. And Woody, you'll remember that we were on a bad decline. Math, history, science, and English were on a downward trajectory. We had to do something. We were passing students along to the next grade without them knowing the core subjects. And to me, that's cruel to the students. It may make them feel good in the short term, but in the long term, when it comes to their ability to have a job and take care of the family, it was not helpful. So Governor Allen pushed forward the standards of learning, and those have been in place for a good while. My struggle, Woody, has really not been with the standards of learning. There are some tweaks that I'm going to be supportive of this year, but it's really when the federal government decided that education was a federal matter, and it is not. Education is an item and a responsibility that legislators in states should be responsible for, and it is not the federal government's prerogative. So when No Child Left Behind came down from President Bush, I very much was concerned about it. I am very much opposed to that legislation, and I believe Virginia, under our SOLs, can handle Virginia much better, and I happen to be pretty strongly in support of states' rights. So in this case, I think if the federal government would pull away, not require their testing that they have, and then allow us to concentrate on math, history, science, and English, allow us to take the test close to when the subject matter is taught, it would be helpful. But my biggest concern right now is that we could have a backlash that would take away standards altogether. And the result of that would clearly be that we would be on the path we were on before. And so I'm hopeful that we will make the adjustments that are needed but not move away from high academic standards.
And I think to that point, I think part of what we're going to see in a package of alterations to the standards of learning, one will be to cut down the numbers of tests, particularly in the earlier years. The second will be to apply a more critical thinking and more problem-solving perspective rather than simply rote memory. And thirdly, and I'm excited about this, a bit of a pivoting away from just simply regurgitating facts to actually applying those facts. How do we take some information? Indian tribes of Virginia, don't just simply tell me next week in a quiz what they are. Let's apply what we learned of that part of history or social sciences. And I'm very excited. I think that's the right path for the Commonwealth to go.
Great. I see another matter that's been around for at least 3 years has gained a lot of traction this session. Still named after Tim Tebow, who unfortunately is no longer in the NFL, but it would allow those students who are homeschooled to participate in high school athletics. Senator, where do you see that going?
Well, over the past few years, we've considered it and had very short bill that really didn't have much of the accountability portions in the bill. So while I'm very much in favor of allowing homeschooled students to use their tax dollars and be involved, I do think that the move that has happened this year, which is to include in that bill 8 provisions that have to be met to make sure that, for instance, if the child simply is going to be obstinate and won't work with the school system or has a disciplinary problem and they just to make sure that those issues are addressed, and there are 6 others. I think that's a responsible thing to do. I know that school administrators have said, hey, help us with some other items as it relates to that. So I think we're moving in a better path. My expectation is that the Senate of Virginia will not pass that bill. There's some that just are not very much in favor of homeschoolers in general, and I understand that. But I think that the progression that has taken place on the bill to make sure that the activities are available, but the accountability is there, is really a pretty solid move.
Are you hearing from parents, teachers, and students about that issue?
We've not heard a lot this year. We certainly heard last year to that effect. I've heard certainly it's a fairness issue. I've certainly heard from folks they pay taxes and they ought to have those opportunities for their students as well.
Public safety, cannabinoids, I know you have some legislation dealing with that.
Yes, sir. The synthetic cannabinoids, we have hopefully the bill this year to fix it. One of the challenges is organic chemists, in an attempt to try to profit, but at the harm and the expense of our children, are creating these very, very dangerous bioorganic chemicals. And what they're doing is taking one compound that's already listed in the Code of Virginia as being illegal, tweaking it a bit such that they've created a new chemical that's not deemed to be illegal, and so therefore they're profiting from that. Our legislation this year will be to say that process isn't going to happen. Should you be using these base compounds and you create something new, it's also deemed to be illegal. We're also going to accelerate the process to enlist our colleagues at the Board of Pharmacy as well as the Department of Forensic Science. When they uncover and discover a very dangerous bioorganic chemical, instead of waiting until the next General Assembly session for us to act upon that, they will have the ability to be able to schedule that as a very dangerous drug. And then finally, a large change is heretofore the penalties for manufacturing these chemicals, distributing them, selling them, have been misdemeanors. Going forward, they will be felonies. We need to send a clear and compelling clarion call across the Commonwealth that this simply is unacceptable. We will not allow folks to profit at the expense of the health of our children.
Good idea to keep up with the changing technology. I wish Major League Baseball could do as well.
Indeed.
Department of Justice settlement regarding our training centers. That's going to require over time the closure of some of the training centers in order to ensure that people are in more of a community setting. It's going to cost the state some money. There are going to be some people who are going to lose jobs, but there's no alternative, even though there are a lot of elderly parents now who are really concerned about their adult children who are in those facilities.
They are, and to me, Woody, this is about choice, making sure that individuals who I believe can probably only live in a facility that takes care of their needs on a 24-hour basis. And, you know, Scott and I are conservatives, and we feel strongly about responsibility in government. But let me be clear on this. We need to love people. And loving people means that people who cannot take care of themselves, the most severely retarded individuals in the state of Virginia, live in our area and at Central Virginia's Training Center. And my bills that I've put in and other bills around this state capitol have really been toward, let's implement the settlement. But if a parent believes that their child simply cannot live, in other words, they will die likely if they don't have that type of care, that they'll have the choice of leaving their son or daughter in a facility where they can get that care. So mine says that if you're going to transfer someone out of the system, you have to guarantee that they will have the same quality of care before they can be transferred. So I'm hopeful that we can have movement on that bill. I want to make sure anyone who wants to be out in the community, they have that opportunity, but love those that need to remain enough to make sure that we take care of them too.
Great. And mental health reform is on the agenda. One of the senator's colleagues suffered a tremendous tragedy recently. We've had Virginia Tech a number of years ago, so it's been on the agenda, but it's highlighted, unfortunately, as a result of Senator Deeds' tragedy. Talk to us about what's going on there.
Woody, I think there's sort of a new light that's being shined on a challenge and a problem that we've had for a long, long time. There's some inefficiencies in the way in which our mental health professionals can work with folks that present in extremis with big challenges. And how do we most efficiently do that? How do we professionally do that? How do we timely do that? And yet recognize that we can't just simply take over someone's rights and make assumptions. So I'm very much looking forward to what that ultimate package is going to look like. Those bills are all being worked through our committee systems as we speak, both in the House of Delegates and in the Senate. And I think there's still going to be some changes, even sort of up until the last minute, to make sure that we get it right. We do have a duty and an obligation to some of our most challenged citizens, and we also have an obligation to the taxpayers to make sure that we get it right.
About a minute and a half left. Talking about obligations to our taxpayers, talk to us about Medicaid expansion.
Well, you know, my concern is that we will move into Medicaid expansion and it will become a false promise. And I've talked to the incoming governor about this, and I said, Governor, what we're hearing from Paul Ryan and from Congress is that you're going to get 100%, you'll get 90%, and then you're headed to 50%, which is going to be a multi-billion-dollar bill that's going to come into this legislature. And the governor, to his credit, said, well, I've thought about it, but if that happens, then we'll just pull that benefit back. But Woody, that's not going to happen. You know, you can't extend that credit and then pull it back. So mine is that I think the federal government needs to get its house in order as it relates to Medicaid. Give the state of Virginia and other states the ability to reform the package. If we could just put that package more in line with state employee benefits today, we could save millions and millions of dollars. So I'm unwilling to expand Medicaid, at least with my vote, certainly until the federal government does something to fix what I think is a broken system.
Sorry, we only have a few seconds, but I do want to get your opinion as well.
And I would add to that, the discussion heretofore has been an economic discussion. What we have completely ignored is the health care aspect of that, as well as the personal aspect of that. Simply ensuring a cohort or a group of individuals does not result in or necessarily mean that they'll have better health care outcomes. And in the final analysis, I'm not so sure yet that the people have weighed in on this, whether they're willing to change their expectations for their physicians in their hospitals.
Thank you for being here, Delegate Scott Garrett and Delegate Senator Steve Newman.
Thank you, Woody.
Thanks, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.